Welcome to Brands Hatch. In the county of Kent, in the country of England, the Formula One circus are back in Europe once again after their North American sojourn. Behind us, the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal, the controversial round the houses races in Detroit and Dallas, and now we've got a real traditional road circuit in the traditional home of Grand Prix racing, Great Britain. The British Grand Prix alternates each year between Silverstone and Brands Hatch. Last time the Formula One cars were here in Kent was for the extra European Grand Prix last September. But this year it's Brands Hatch's turn to have the British Grand Prix, and an enormous crowd has turned out for this 10th round of the 16-round World Championship. Pole position has gone to the man who so recently won 2 races on the trot, Nelson Piquet, a blistering lap set at the very beginning of the Saturday afternoon session with an average speed of over 132 miles an hour. But the current championship leader, Alain Prost with the McLaren, was almost as quick and will join Nelson Piquet on the front row of the grid. Alain Prost's own teammate, Niki Lauda, a man who's won this race twice at Brands Hatch already. He's on the inside of the second row with a time fractionally slower than his own teammate, and he's currently lying second in the championship. A man who's turned in a tremendously consistent performance all year, Elio De Angelis. He's finished every single Grand Prix and scored championship points in all but one of them. Behind his Lotus, 5th quickest, Keke Rosberg, the sensational winner of the Dallas Grand Prix just 2 weeks ago, but still not particularly happy with the handling of the Williams Honda, and in this morning's warm-up session, he was slowest of all. Derek Warwick also has had a troublesome practice with the Renault. He crashed in yesterday's practice, but he was going better this morning, and he's 6th quickest and very anxious to go well on his home ground in front of this huge home crowd. It's hot and muggy, and the crowds have been pouring in here since 6:30 this morning when the gates opened. Official estimates 110,000 spectators. That's a record crowd. And we've got the green flag now for 27 starters. All sorts of controversy being going on here surrounding the Tyrrell team for alleged infringements of the Formula One regulations in the North American races. The Tyrrell cars are unlikely to be allowed to score championship points, and that has allowed a 27th starter, Joe Gartner, in the Azella to start from the back. So now the cars on this final warm-up lap. It's, as I say, a warm and muggy day, and on this bumpy, twisty and demanding circuit, the choice of tyres is going to be very, very important. The team managers must ensure that they've chosen a compound soft enough for maximum grip, but a rubber compound hard enough to go the full distance on this demanding track. Everybody weaving now to get some heat into their tyres. That's Joe Gartner at the back in the blue and red Azella, and now the entire 27-car field on this undulating and slightly curving start-finish straight here at Brands Hatch. 75 laps ahead of them. Nelson Piquet at the front, on the left of the picture. On the right, in the red and white McLaren number 7, Alain Prost. Behind them, Lauda and De Angelis. The traditional start will be the red light. There it is, followed by the green. The green, and the field gets away. Ayrton Senna moves very quickly further down the grid, but it's Alain Prost who gets away first before Nelson Piquet charges to the front, and it's Piquet who's leading down the steep dive from Paddock Bend up the hill now to Druids. Piquet, Prost, Elio De Angelis has made an excellent start, and he's up into 3rd place. Nigel Mansell up there with them, moving ahead. Lauda it is who's 4th as they go down the hill, the whole field pouring. Oh, and that is Patrese almost spinning, and a tremendous chain reaction there. Somebody has crashed. There are tyres and wheels everywhere, yellow flags, but that's Philippe Alliot's Ram coming to a halt. That, I think, was that enormously airborne car that we saw there. It was Patrese who started. There you see it. Patrese goes sideways. Cheever tries to avoid him. Ghinzani hits Cheever. Alliot goes all the way up the barrier, almost over Cheever's head. Wheels and tyres and uprights fly. But meanwhile, ahead of all the drama, Nelson Piquet leads. Prost, De Angelis, Lauda, Derek Warwick. Keke Rosberg is up there too. Then it's Mansell and the rest of the field pouring through the left-hander at Stirling's Bend and on down to complete this first lap. And over the start line and down into Paddock Bend. The order is the same with Warwick, Rosberg, the two Ferraris. Oh, and that's Senna forcing his way through on the inside. Ayrton Senna, who made that very aggressive start, then seemed to slip back a little bit, but Ayrton Senna now on Alboretto's tail as they go round Druids. That's the remains of Eddie Cheever's car, and there is Stefan Johansson in one of the Tyrrells with, I think, a flat rear tyre as well as a damaged rear wing. They've got fire extinguisher fluid on Joe Gartner's Azella, which also came to grief as part of that same accident. The car in the tyres, nobody hurt, we're told, but out of the race, Gartner, Cheever, Johansson, Philippe Alliot, and meanwhile the leaders on their second lap, up out of Dingledell, up through Dingledell Corner on towards Stirling's Bend, and Nelson Piquet trying to make the break from Alain Prost, but he's not getting away from him. Prost on the curb, Prost using all the road, and we've got a new third man because De Angelis has been passed by Niki Lauda, so it's Brabham, McLaren, and Nelson Piquet knows that he's got to make an early break if he's going to shake off the attentions of these McLarens. Down the steep plunge into Paddock Bend, Prost and Lauda follow. Derek Warwick is also past Elio De Angelis now, so Warwick up to fourth place with the Renault, up to Druids now, steeply up that hill. Lauda in third place. Warwick and De Angelis fighting for fourth. Already in bottom bend, they've cleared away all the mess of that accident, and Niki Lauda is in a strong third place, but it's Prost who's putting the pressure now on Nelson Piquet. Piquet, who won in Canada, who won in Detroit, who was out of luck again in Dallas, so he's got just 18 points so far this year from those two wins. He needs more points now that we're well in the second half of the season if he's to retain any sort of hope of repeating his World Championship title. And Alain Prost, who so nearly got the World Championship last year, who's got a tremendous lead this year, he is really challenging. He's closer and closer all the time to Nelson Piquet. Under the bridge they come down into clearways. Piquet, Prost, Lauda, then Warwick, with De Angelis slipping back into the clutches of Keke Rosberg on their fourth lap down the steep hill through Paddock Bend. Under the bridge, up to Druids, the slowest corner on the circuit, still taken at 85 to 90 miles an hour, down the hill, across the road, fourth gear, through Graham Hill Bend, the short straight, up to the tight Surtees corner, an uphill left-hander which goes on and on and on forever. Number 7 is Alain Prost. He's in second place and he's challenging. Now they go down that long back section, down Pilgrim's Drop, up to Hawthorne Bend. A fourth gear corner, although if they're feeling really brave in qualifying, they sometimes get through it in fifth. But with a full fuel load now, it'll certainly be fourth. Then Westfield, where Johnny Chicotto, the Venezuelan, came to grief in the first day of practice. The Tolman driver now in hospital with leg injuries. And Piquet now through the left-hander of Stirling's. And Lauda is closing as well now. These two McLarens are really setting their sights on putting the pressure on the Brabham of Nelson Piquet. Over the start-finish line, the gap closer all the time. Lauda bounding over the bumps in pursuit, and we see the high shot as they come down Paddock, up the hill into Druids. Piquet taking a tight line, but look how close Prost is. Prost within a length there under braking. Down the hill now, into Graham Hill Bend once more. Lauda perhaps a little bit further back, but Derek Warwick in fourth place is now a long way down. Elio De Angelis still is fifth. Keke Rosberg dropping away, and it's still this wonderful three-car battle for the lead. Brabham, McLaren. And of the 9 races we've had so far this year, these 3 drivers have between them won 7 of them. There's Warwick in 4th place, De Angelis in 5th place. The gap behind them, the story is told. Keke Rosberg in the pits. An early stop for Keke Rosberg. There's some problem at the back. They're working, I think, on the pipe that goes into the intercooler there on the right-hand side of the car. It's very, very hot indeed. but some sort of problem with that pipe to the intercooler of the turbocharger for Keke Rosberg. So the Dallas winner already in trouble, and look how close Alain Prost is now. Alain Prost making a little challenge there briefly before he gets back into the slipstream and has to take the line behind the Brabham as they go up to Druids once more. Nelson Piquet moves across to the right, shuts the door, and we've got the new sixth man replacing Keke Rosberg, Ayrton Senna, the young Brazilian who has been charging from the start, who was fastest of all in the very first practice session on Friday morning. The only tailman in the race, of course, because of Cecotto non-starting, and Senna going very strongly this early in the race in 6th place. But here's the leading trio up to Hawthorns. On to Westfields. Now through Westfields and on towards Dingledell, down and up once more. The top of this hill, the third gear right-hander of Dingledell, followed by the third gear left at Stirling's. There it is, and Piquet, Prost and Lauda go through just like that. These three now equidistant. Prost has slipped back just a little bit as they go into clearways. But Piquet can't relax. He wanted to make an early break to shake off these ever-present McLarens. He hasn't been able to do it, and Prost is sitting there waiting for a chance to get close and to pounce. Up to Druids once more. This time Prost not close enough to challenge, about 2 lengths between it as they go out and down Graham Hill Bend, Lauda following in 3rd place. But as they come up to Surtees, Prost is close again. The Marlboro McLarens not wearing the name of their cigarette sponsor in deference to television rules in Britain. And while the first 3 go on their way, Rosberg still in the pits. They're still working on that turbocharger pipe. The green and white uniforms of the Williams mechanics much in evidence. Here's the 4th man, Derek Warwick, going strongly on his home ground, but now Elio De Angelis is closing again. Elio De Angelis closing back up to Derek Warwick, and Ayrton Senna still going well in 6th place. And still Nelson Piquet unable to relax for an instant. The constant corners, the curbs, the ups and downs of Brands Hatch. Oh, and Prost has a little look at the inside going up to Druids that time. But Piquet was there, shutting the door, and Prost had to hang back. Through Graham Hill Bend once more, along past the crowds on South Bank, into Surtees, that long left-hander in 3rd gear. Piquet's hands twitching on the wheel, Prost tucked into the slipstream. This is the fastest part now, 190 miles an hour down this dip before they dab the brakes, take 4th for Hawthorne Bend. And this time Niki Lauda has slipped back a little bit, and he's just watching developments, letting his own teammate sort out the leader Brabham. But if Piquet can keep the door shut, if Piquet persists in refusing to make any mistake or give Alain Prost any opportunity, then the Frenchman is going to find it difficult to find a way past the Brabham. Prost as close as he could possibly be, under the bridge, down into clearways. Little twitch from the back end of the Brabham there. Oh, and Prost is lined up. Prost is very close inside. Prost trying to force his way through that first apex onto the long straight. But at paddock, does Prost do it? No, he doesn't. Prost doing everything possible to get through Nelson Piquet, but Piquet is just not having it. Prost attacks once more. This is magnificent Grand Prix racing between the 2 men, probably, who are currently the fastest men in Grand Prix racing, and certainly the 2 cars that have shown themselves to be the pacemakers all year, the Brabham and the McLaren. But once more, Prost is held off down the fast section of Pilgrim's Drop. Up again into Hawthorns. Prost not quite close enough that time to find a way past. Now he has a little look on the inside at Westfields. That's a very, very tight place to get through. Prost can't do it. He's trying to worry Nelson Piquet into a mistake, but he himself clips the curb there, a little twitch from the McLaren, and look how close Niki Lauda has caught up. Because Piquet's now driving defensively, Piquet's keeping the door shut. Perhaps his lap times have increased a little bit. Lauda is right up there to attack now. This is clearways. Clark curve, the right-hand kink that follows it onto the straight. And Prost tucked in behind. Lauda is closing. Is Prost close enough in the slipstream to dart out? He does dart out. He goes through. Under braking, Prost forces his way through the inside at Paddock Bend. Up the hill, and Lauda's going through too. Oh, and they nearly touch. Piquet and Lauda nearly touched there under braking. But Nelson Piquet had to concede that Niki Lauda had the corner. This is Prost going through again at Paddock over the yellow line. Piquet simply has to let him go. And Lauda, of course, was able to take advantage of Piquet being briefly offline to follow Prost through. Prost glancing in his mirror there and noting that the pursuit is coming not from the man he's just overtaken, but from his own teammate Niki Lauda. And already they're up to Westfields. Oh, and that's Jonathan Palmer, who walks away, limps away, in fact, from the Ram, which is parked with only 3 wheels on it, having clouted the barrier at Clearways very hard indeed. I think that car's actually more than smoking. I think it might even just be starting to burn. But you see, oh, it is very definitely burning. Yes, the Ram Heart of Jonathan Palmer on fire now, just on the outside of Clearways. The marshals quickly onto it with the fire extinguisher, but Palmer had gone straight on into the barriers at the outside of Clearways, and he is conclusively out of the race, and they're stopping the race. That's the red flag at the start-finish line. So the officials have decided, no doubt because of the wreckage from Jonathan Palmer's car, the car very close to the edge of the track, and the marshals have been working there putting the fire out, and the course car comes out, the red flag is out, and the race is going to be stopped. Alain Prost in the lead, Niki Lauda in second place, and interestingly, there is the man who was third, Nelson Piquet, who has just come into the pits. Nelson Piquet had already decided to peel off into the pit lane, having lost the lead, having lost second place. Nelson Piquet had decided to come in for, no doubt, a fresh set of tyres, and while Piquet was in the pit lane, at the end of his 12th lap, out came the red flag to stop the race. And now we've got the 2 McLaren drivers parking their cars, Prost going straight to pole position, Niki Lauda behind him. There is the wreckage of the Ram Heart, and this has been a most unfortunate start to the British Grand Prix, particularly for John McDonald, the boss of the Ram team, because the car that you saw flying in the air on this corner, Graham Hill Bend, at the start, was the other Ram of Philippe Alliot. There you see the positions at the end of 11 laps, because the rules will say that if the red flag came out at the end of 12 laps, they will take the positions at the end of the previous lap before the red flag came out. So Nelson Piquet, despite the fact that he just lost the lead, he just lost second place and he'd come into the pits, at the restart, Nelson Piquet will take pole position by virtue of the fact that he was the leader. Here's the new grid. Piquet and Prost, Lauda and Warwick, De Angelis and Senna, Alboreto and Tombe, Mansell and Boutsen, De Cesaris, Arnoux, Lafitte, Sura, Patrese, who recovered from that first lap moment, Ginzani, Beloff and Hainaut, Rottengata and Rosberg, who did rejoin after that long pit stop. But of course we've got only 23 cars on the grid of the 27 starters, because already we've lost 4 cars due to accidents. So this is the second warm-up lap, and we have word from the Williams pit. Keke Rosberg, in fact, will not take the restart. So 22 cars on the grid coming round. There's a Ferrari fan, there's a Renault fan. So the Brabham and McLaren battle, not important for those two. They want to see Ferraris and Renaults at the front, but it is a Brabham on pole, a McLaren and a Renault, the front 4 cars. Ayrton Senna there in 6th place behind De Angelis. There's the red light. The second start. There is the green. They get away. Oh, and this time Prost does make a good start. This time Prost is determined to do it all right, and it's Alain Prost nosing ahead. Alain Prost goes ahead It's Prost from Piquet from Lauda, then the two Renaults. Patrick Tombé's made a good start also. Up into Druids, the two Renaults side by side at Druids, Warwick and Tombé, then the two Lotuses side by side, then one of the Ferraris, that I think was Alboreto. But Alain Prost, indignant no doubt that his first efforts at overtaking Nelson Piquet were all in vain, has now done it again, and he is the leader. Prost from Piquet, from Lauda, from Warwick and Tombé. Then it's De Angelis, Mansell being challenged by Alboreto. Alboreto goes by, Mansell trying to shut the door as they go through Westfields, on down towards Dingledell, and then Stirling's Bend. And Prost is getting away. This is Dingledell corner. The two Renaults following through, but at Stirling's it's Prost, Piquet and Lauda. 1, 2, 3, and the battle is on again, but it's a McLaren-Brabham-McLaren sandwich. On the brakes, through Clearways, on to Clark Curve. Renault still 4th and 5th. There they are. Over the start-finish line, Prost getting away before Piquet closes just a shade under braking. Lauda is there, twitching across the apex. Oh, and Prost locks a wheel there. Prost on the absolute limit under braking for Druids. Out of Druids. Has Prost flatted a front tyre, we wonder? Certainly he locked a wheel very clearly there, but on to the bottom straight, on to Surtees, and the two Renaults, the Lotus, the Ferrari, and Ayrton Senna challenging Alboreto. Ayrton Senna forcing his way through. So it's Senna 7th, De Angelis 6th, Tombé 5th, Warwick 4th, that's the two Renaults, and Lauda, Piquet and Prost still the leading trio. There's Senna ahead of Alboreto, with De Cesaris following through, ahead now of Nigel Mansell, who's slipped back a lot of places, having made a good start, but the trio of leaders already at Stirling's Bend, and Warwick and Tombé a lot closer this time. There's De Angelis, there's Senna, there's Alboreto, De Cesaris. Boots and Zaros is next up, and Arnoux challenging Nigel Mansell there. So René Arnoux is moving up. Alboreto also well up. The Ferraris showing better in this second part, but it's the McLarens that are at the front, and it's Nelson Piquet who is trying to wriggle out of this awkward position he finds himself in, where he is sandwiched by the two red and white cars. The two Renaults are still up there with them, so the leader's not getting away from the Renaults with anything like the rapidity that they did before the race was stopped. Elio De Angelis still there, Ayrton Senna closing on De Angelis, so Senna moving up well, and Alboreto now has been passed by the Ligier of Andrea De Cesaris. Battles developing all the way down the field. Brands Hatch always shows us splendid battles, this very characteristic circuit with its corners, its bumps, its cambers, its ups and downs. And down and up Dingledell goes Alain Prost, the leader. Piquet and Lauda slipping away just a little bit. Prost is building this lead now, settling into the groove, whereas Piquet looking just slightly ragged at Stirling's, using all the curb. Prost at Clearways, on to Clark Curve, over the undulating start-finish straight. Piquet, Lauda, Warwick and Tombé follow, and already the leader, number 7, at Druids. Out of Druids, down to Graham Hill Bend. Warwick perhaps closing on Lauda a little. Is Warwick closing on this leading battle? Tombé staying with Warwick, so it's McLaren, Brabham and Renault up at the front now. Piquet incidentally driving the only Brabham left in the race, because Brabham number 2, driven by Teo Fabi today, has already retired with electrical problems. There's Warwick in 4th place, Tombé 5th, and that's the other Williams in the pits. That's Jacques Lafitte's car. Jacques Lafitte with the green crash helmet and the blue overalls on the left of the picture. Off comes the crash helmet. He is out of the race, and telltale smoke from the back of the car, so that looked like some terminal mechanical problem. and still Piquet has this task of trying to close on Prost, and still he seems to be slipping back into the clutches of Niki Lauda. Piquet, of course, having started the race on fresh tyres, and we know that he went for a slightly harder compound of tyre than he started the original race with, having found that his first set wore out in just a dozen laps. So Piquet's car perhaps not quite as well balanced now for this circuit as either of the McLarens. The McLarens, incidentally, were first and second quickest this morning in the morning warm-up, which is always a very good indicator. There you see the gaps. That order, of course, is on cumulative time, so it shows Warwick a whole 16 seconds behind Niki Lauda, which is his position when you add the two sections of the race together. But in fact, Warwick is a lot closer to Niki Lauda now. There goes Prost, Piquet and Lauda, and there you saw a glimpse of Derek Warwick in fourth place, certainly very much closer to the leaders than he was when the race was stopped at the end of 11 laps. Now, on the top straight, McLaren, Brabham, McLaren, Renault and Renault, Warwick following the leading trio over the bumps on the start-finish straight. There is Derek Warwick in Paddock Bend, using all the road, just kissing the curb on the outside, now into Druids, that tight second gear, right-hand hairpin, accelerating hard down the road, put it across to the left for Graham Hill Bend, now on to Surtees along Cooper Straight, but of course it's not a straight like so many of the straights at Brands Hatch, it's actually a long curve. Now Derek Warwick is going down Pilgrim's Drop up to 192 miles an hour. The Renaults were touching during practice, and they'll be going almost as quickly as that in the race, despite the heavier fuel load. Tombe follows. You can always tell the Renaults apart because Warwick's car has blue flashes on the rear wing, Tombe's has red. The blue number 16 and the red number 15 on the two cars also identifying Warwick from Tombe, but that is Piquet, and there is Lauda, and Prost creeping ever so slightly away. That's Lauda now through Paddock Bend, up once more to Druids. On with the lock, you can see his gloves working away on the top of the steering wheel, and Lauda doesn't seem to be making any impression at this stage now to Nelson Piquet. That gap has remained constant for 3 or 4 laps now, but Prost is definitely increasing the gap between himself and Nelson Piquet. Cumulatively, we've now had 20 laps, and although you see Patrick Tombe following Derek Warwick in 5th place on the road, cumulatively in 5th place, we've still got Elio De Angelis, with Patrick Tombe 6th, Ayrton Senna 7th, Michele Alboreto 8th, and Andrea De Cesaris 9th, just ahead of 10th man René Arnoux. But there is De Cesaris, and as you see on the road, he is ahead of both Alboreto and René Arnoux, and I don't think either of them like it very much. The two Ferraris absolutely clambering all over the back of the Ligier, but as we've seen so often, Andrea De Cesaris is a very hard man to pass. De Cesaris in the Renault-powered Ligier, holding off Alboreto and René Arnoux. So while there's a wonderful 3-car battle at the front, this is a 3-car battle out of the championship points, but nonetheless hot for that. And the two Ferraris close, and Arnoux is attacking Alboreto. Arnoux goes past Alboreto. Oh, and they were so close there. The two Ferraris almost touching wheels, and I'm sure that Enzo Ferrari, the old man in Maranello, who always follows the Grand Prix on television as they come through live, I'm sure his heart was in his old mouth there as he saw his two cars almost touch wheels at the treacherous 130-mile-an-hour downhill Paddock Bend. While all that was going on, De Cesaris has a brief breathing space. He looks in his mirror briefly there to see where have the Ferraris gone. He's now got René Arnoux behind him. Alboreto has given best to Arnoux, and now Arnoux is going to start to tackle De Cesaris. Two very hard men here. René Arnoux, oh so determined, that wonderful race he had the other week in Dallas, where he came through to second place. De Cesaris, who's not having a particularly happy first season with the French Ligier team, having driven for Alfa Romeo last year and having driven originally for McLaren in Formula One. Arnoux and Alboreto following on. And we've got trouble for Nigel Mansell. Nigel Mansell slowing on the bottom straight. Yes, and Mansell has pulled off. He slipped down and down to 11th place. And I think I could hear him having trouble selecting a gear as he came past on the top straight underneath our box that time. And I would guess that it's a repeat of the gearbox problems that has so often plagued the Lotuses. And this is another problem. Thierry Boutsen, the Belgian, getting out of the BMW-powered Arrows. He's parked it by the side of the road on the fast back section. Off come the gloves, brief look over the shoulder, and the Belgian driver walks away. And Niki Lauda does it. Niki Lauda takes second place. Niki Lauda finally has taken that second place, but Piquet's challenging back. Piquet comes back and they're side by side at Druids. Oh, so close. But Nelson Piquet has to give best. Niki Lauda is through. It's McLaren's first and second. And Elio De Angelis, meanwhile, is right up with Patrick Tambay once more. He's in front of him on aggregate, but he's behind him on the road. But Elio De Angelis challenging Patrick Tambay. And now we've got the leaders in among the back markers, and that could well make quite a difference to this race. Alain Prost in the lead. Niki Lauda now past Nelson Piquet's Brabham at last into second place. It's McLaren first, McLaren second, Brabham third, Renault fourth, and on aggregate it's Lotus fifth. And that Lotus, the sole surviving Lotus in this race now, in the hands of Elio De Angelis, giving strong pressure to Patrick Tambay's Renault, which is still in front of it on the road. Now, can Lauda shake off Nelson Piquet? Can Nelson Piquet fight back? Well, there is Lauda, and the road behind him does look quite a bit more empty. So now that Lauda is by, he is pulling away. There you see the gap at Druids, just a lap after it all happened, and Nelson Piquet several lengths behind as they go down to Graham Hill Bend and along the Cooper Straight. But the back markers could play a part. In front of Niki Lauda now, that is the Ligier of Francois Hainaut, and Lauda has to swerve to get by. Lauda swerving round. There he comes, having just passed Hainaut. Prost quite some way ahead. Prost has passed these two back markers. In front of Niki Lauda now is Riccardo Patrese, the man whose sideways moment started that chain reaction on the first lap of the first section of the race. Patrese goes through. There is Lauda. And now Piquet is also past Francois Hainaut's Ligier. And in these back markers, Piquet could find an opportunity to get back. There you see the aggregate order with De Angelis fifth, Ayrton Senna now sixth, 52 seconds behind the leader, but 7 seconds is almost exactly the gap between leader Prost and second man Niki Lauda, and Nelson Piquet is clinging on. That's De Angelis with Ayrton Senna behind him, Patrick Tambay ahead of him, but on aggregate, Tambay is behind both De Angelis and Senna. Tambay going much more quickly now than he was in the first section, but De Angelis closing and Ayrton Senna going, I would guess, quicker than both of them. Senna, who was the hero of that very wet Monaco Grand Prix when he finished second, and many say had the race continued he could have won, but Tambay with De Angelis close on his tail. De Angelis closes right up under braking for Druids, away from Druids, away from that battle, in fact, because here are the two Ferraris still stuck behind De Cesaris, and that's Arnoux trying to squeeze through. Oh, and that was somebody coming out of the pits there. That was a very crowded moment indeed. Marc Surer in the Arrows coming out of the pits just at the moment that René Arnoux made his desperate attempt to go inside De Cesaris at Paddock Bend, and poor René Arnoux just had to come off the power there. Otherwise he would have collected not only De Cesaris but also Marc Surer, and so now he's got to do it all again. De Cesaris has pulled away just briefly. Alboreto is tucked in behind Arnoux, and still these two Ferraris unable to find a way past the Ligier Renault of Andrea De Cesaris. The Italian in the French car, the Frenchman in the Italian car, the Italian in the Italian car, they're all out of the points at the moment, but they're providing one of the best battles on the circuit. And in the pits now, we've got Patrick Tambay. It's a tyre stop for one of the Renaults, so Tambay, who had been slipping back, gets fresh tyres. Now, it may well be, ooh, that's a quick one. I made that just on 9 stationary seconds on my stopwatch. So Tambay has needed fresh tyres. Will Derek Warwick, currently in 4th place, have the same problem? We don't know whether Tambay and Warwick have chosen the same tyre compounds. Several drivers, in fact, are juggling with compounds and use a harder tyre on the outside, on the left-hand tyres than on the right-hand tyres, because it's the left tyres that take most of the strain here at Brands Hatch, although the corners do go both ways. There's Tambay out of the pits again, and we've got our lovely battle back with the Ligier and the two Ferraris, except that they've now got Patrick Tambay on fresh rubber just out of the pits, just in front of them. Patrick Tambay in the Renault, De Cesaris in the Ligier Renault, Arnoux and Alboreto in the two Ferraris, all tied together. You could almost put a pocket handkerchief over the three of them, but Tambay now does pull away. Now Arnoux's going to try again, but De Cesaris isn't going to let him do it that time. De Cesaris keeps the door shut, and Arnoux follows the line through. Now Arnoux tries on the inside at Druids. No, he's not going to do it this time either. And Alboreto sits behind and waits to see what's going to happen. And there's no doubt that these three aren't running anything like as quickly as the front runners, because Patrick Tambay is pulling away very quickly on his fresh tyres. Arnoux stuck behind De Cesaris, Alboreto sitting behind Arnoux, and there is Tambay well away, going up to Hawthorns, onto the short Derek Minter straight. Tambay down Dingledale as we wait for the pursuit. And we see, in fact, the leader, Alain Prost, on his confident way, now having shaken off the pursuit completely. Niki Lauda is a long way back, and Prost can concentrate on working his way through these back markers. A little twitch from the front of the car there as he came into Dingledale corner. This is Sterling's. Oh yes, and that car is understeering. There's a handling problem there with Alain Prost's car. You could see him piling on more lock for that left-hander, and he still touched the curb. So Alain Prost not looking as tidy as he had earlier, still going very, very quickly. There you saw the blue flag, because Niki Lauda has in fact closed up on him. Alain Prost in a little bit of handling problem there, I would think. Let's watch him at Druids. And quite tidy at Druids, of course, a slower corner there, away from Druids, but Niki Lauda has got very much closer to Alain Prost. And Nelson Piquet has a back marker between himself and Lauda, but Lauda is closing, and Alain Prost, I think, is slowing. Is Alain Prost in problems? Certainly the car seemed to be understeering. Yes, and Niki Lauda goes ahead. Niki Lauda takes the lead, and Alain Prost is slowing right down. The Brabham's going to go by as well. Niki Lauda leads. Back marker Sura goes by, but surely Nelson Piquet is going to go by Prost. Whatever Prost's problem is, it's serious. Yes, Piquet goes through. Nelson Piquet is second. Alain Prost demoted to third. And I thought that there was something amiss on the last lap, because you could see that Prost was having trouble turning that car through Sterling's. Piquet moves away, Sura moves away, and Alain Prost slows right down, and I think we're going to see McLaren number 7 coming into the pits. Under the bridge, down to Clearways comes Alain Prost, and indeed he peels into the pit lane. Now, is it going to be something that they can sort out? Are we going to see an Alain Prost drive back through the field, or is it terminal? And Prost pointing, I think, to the front of the car there. Yes, they're changing the front tyres. Prost gesticulating. No, he wants to talk to the mechanics. He's waving them close. It's more serious than that. and he speaks to one of the McLaren personnel, gestures with his hands, and this looks more serious. Alain Prost, the former leader, the current leader in the World Championship, they're wheeling the car forward. They're going to take the bodywork off. Yes, the bodywork's coming off. Prost still in the car. There you see the aggregate position after now 38 laps, 3.5 seconds between Lauda and Piquet. Warwick third, De Angelis fourth. Senna is now up to fifth. Patrick Tambay a distant sixth, despite that pit stop for fresh tyres. But Niki Lauda now comfortably ahead, and they're wheeling the McLaren back into the pits. Still Alain Prost sits in the car. Is he going to stay there while they do more work? But the McLaren number 7 pushed right into the back of the pits for more work, and we can't tell what the problem is, but it's obviously very serious because it's been a long pit stop, over a lap now has Alain Prost been in the pits, and here is our new leader, Niki Lauda. Lauda, who won the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch 2 years ago, his return year to Grand Prix racing after his 2-year layoff with the McLaren. And of course Lauda won the controversial 1976 Grand Prix here, when James Hunt was first past the flag only to be disqualified, and Niki Lauda, driving of course for Ferrari in those days, got the victory. Ferrari, of course, not faring so well at Brands Hatch today. On aggregate, we've got Alboreto in 7th place and Arnoux in 9th place, with De Cesaris between them. But on the road, De Cesaris is still in front of Arnoux and Alboreto. They're still struggling to get past them. Niki Lauda, meanwhile, out of Druids, down the hill to Graham Hill Bend, and he's now absolutely on his own. He can settle down to the sort of clean, professional drive which he loves to do. Lauda, who's had a lot of bad luck this year, but has won 2 Grand Prix despite that. He's been leading others when his car has let him down. And there is Nelson Piquet, not very far behind. Piquet, in fact, I think is closer than he was last lap. Yes, Nelson Piquet is putting in a charge. Now, it may be that Niki Lauda is relaxing a little bit, waiting to see how close Piquet can get to him. It may be even that he's trying to tantalise Piquet, let Piquet get close to him and then pull away. Whatever, it's certainly providing a magnificent British Grand Prix, and how sad that that man, Alain Prost, can only just watch from the sidelines and see his own teammate leading the race and see his own chance of 9 championship points at Brands Hatch today going down the drain. Piquet fighting the Brabham across the apex at Paddock Bend, up to Druids now. Down the hill, Piquet striving to find a 1/10 of a second here, a 100th of a second there, up to Surtees. Meanwhile, the leader on the long back section, there comes Piquet on his tail. They go up briefly to 190 miles an hour at the bottom of this dip before they go up to Hawthorne's Bend, the fast right-hand kink to the sharper Westfield Bend there. Down the hill once more to Dingle Dell. Suspensions, shock absorbers and brakes all taking a real punishing round Brands Hatch. 2.6 very, very hard miles. Now Sterling's the left-hander. Piquet off the curb that time, just using all the road and no more. Very neat and very tidy, and no doubt very, very quick. Clearways. Clark curve. There's a back marker ahead of Lauda. Lauda is past it. It was Hugh Brottengatter, the Dutchman, in the white Spirit with the Hart engine, and 2.6 is the official gap at this point. The back marker between them, Brottengatter in the Spirit, just could possibly delay Piquet if Piquet's unlucky enough to close right up just when they're getting to the apex of a corner. And there you got a glimpse of the 2 Ferraris still stuck behind De Cesaris. Now this could be absolutely fascinating, because that trio of cars going through Hawthorne Bend there are just ahead of the leader. Niki Lauda is going to catch up with the De Cesaris, Arnoux, Alboreto trio, and he's going to have to work his way through. There is Piquet, who's now lapped Rottengata, and I could guess that the two Ferraris and the Ligier are going to be so intent on their own battle that they may, unintentionally anyway, hold up Niki Lauda and allow Nelson Piquet to get very much closer. There's Piquet, and he's going to be able to see exactly what's happening in front of him, and the Brazilian former world champion is an expert at this sort of racecraft. Oh, a twitch there from Arnoux. It's Alboreto ahead of Arnoux, incidentally, now. There they are, all together at Druids. Lauda closing on Arnoux. Alboreto as close as he possibly can get to De Cesaris. And a further intrigue is that De Cesaris himself is coming up to lap his own teammate, Francois Hainaut. There he does it, goes very close to him indeed down the long back straight. In fact, Hainaut going very slowly there, and De Cesaris didn't leave him any more room than he had to. In fact, Hainaut passed by all of them, including Piquet, but look at this gaggle, look at this quartet. De Cesaris, Alboreto, Arnoux and Lauda all as close as that, and is Arnoux going to make life easy for Niki Lauda? The Ferrari of Arnoux with its mirrors full of the race leader Niki Lauda. They're out of Sterling's. Lauda not attempting to get by at this stage, but as they come down now to the start-finish straight, De Cesaris, Arnoux is behind Alboreto, Lauda is behind Arnoux, and Lauda does indeed go past Arnoux up to Paddock Bend. So Lauda between the two Ferraris. Now Lauda is going to... Oh, and Alboreto going through at last. Oh, that was so very close. Alboreto and De Cesaris interlocking wheels at Druids there. But finally, Alboreto said, I've had enough. I don't want to stick behind this Ligier anymore. I certainly don't want to have the leader coming past and spoiling my chances of getting by. And now look how at once Alboreto has pulled away from De Cesaris. Now De Cesaris has to give best to Lauda, who darts in front just before Hawthorns, chops back in front of the Ligier. So Alboreto is past, Lauda is past, Arnoux and Piquet are still stuck behind the Ligier. And somebody waved somebody on there. It was Arnoux graciously waving Nelson Piquet past. So now it's only the persistent De Cesaris who is splitting the first and second place men. How long is it going to take Nelson Piquet to get past De Cesaris? Oh, and I think he did it there, just out of the picture. I think he forced his way through at clearways. Yes, indeed he did. So now we've got Lauda and Piquet together once more, with Alboreto still ahead of the leader, Lauda. Up at Druids, that was where, just a lap ago, Alboreto and De Cesaris had that heart-stopping moment where they actually got their wheels virtually interlocked. But now going down to Surtees, Piquet, De Cesaris, there's De Cesaris, and Alboreto still has his mirrors full of Niki Lauda. There is Piquet. The Brabham with this triangular air intake, which it's been wearing since the North American races, slightly changed for this race indeed, and no more sign apparently of the difficulties that Nelson Piquet had in Montreal when his feet got burned by that new oil radiator at the front. The Brabham, a very, very well-sorted car, even if it doesn't yet seem to be quite as quick as the McLaren on this circuit anyway. Piquet a little untidier there, actually using the rough at the exit of Sterling's. There is Niki Lauda with Alboreto still in front. Alboreto is going very, very quickly now. So furious, I think, was he at being stuck for so long behind De Cesaris. He's now determined to make up ground, but Lauda surely will pass him soon. Lauda closes as they go up to Druids, and Lauda isn't going to himself want to get stuck behind the Ferrari because Piquet is closing all the time. Alboreto going slightly slower than Lauda would want to, Piquet using that advantage to close up on the leader. Surtees once more, up over the brow. Now Lauda is tucked in the slipstream as they go down the fast section, and now he goes ahead and Alboreto kept out of the way. He got the blue flag, he moved across to the right-hand side of the road, so he quite deliberately allowed Niki Lauda to go through. Having stayed in front of him, he didn't hold him up at all. 1:13.915, Niki Lauda's best lap and the best lap of the race so far. And that's almost 3 seconds slower than they were going in qualifying, than Nelson Piquet's pole position qualifying time indeed, as Piquet goes himself past Alboreto. And now we can get a clear picture of whether Nelson Piquet is able to reel in the Brabham. We can get the stopwatch on it once again. This is Paddock Bend. Piquet with clear road ahead of him, Alboreto following them, up to Druids once more. And inevitably, the Ligier of De Cesaris still has cars stuck behind it. René Arnoux' Ferrari still there, but also Derek Warwick has caught up with them to lap them. Derek Warwick, who's been in third place ever since Alain Prost's retirement, and Warwick now behind Arnoux. Arnoux is going to let Warwick through. Warwick takes Arnoux on the inside at Surtees, and still poor René Arnoux hasn't yet had the opportunity to grapple with the Ligier. Now, this is a real battle for a real place, because Elio De Angelis has been caught by Ayrton Senna. Ayrton Senna right up with De Angelis. Ayrton Senna, who's driven so strongly all this race, gets on the inside of De Angelis, who is indeed slowing at Paddock Bend, and the Tolman is clearly through. It was here 2 years ago that we had the first sight of what Tolman were really capable of, when Derek Warwick got his Tolman up into second place, but now Ayrton Senna has got his Tolman up into fourth place. Derek Warwick is third, Piquet of course still second, Lauda still leading. We're going to see it again, a perfect manoeuvre, and Elio De Angelis I don't think able to do anything very much about that. De Angelis certainly has now begun to slow. De Angelis, however, still in fifth place, and that's Piquet slowing. Piquet slows. Piquet looks in his mirror. There's a puff of smoke from the back of the Brabham. Second man, Nelson Piquet, suddenly slows. He pulls over to the right-hand side of the road, and Michele Alboreto goes storming by. And once again, as Niki Lauda goes on his triumphant way, once again, the Brabham BMW has run into trouble late in the race. Now, whatever Nelson Piquet's trouble is, he is still second, although he's going to lose that second place, I would think, very, very quickly indeed. And it's a matter of whether he can nurse the Brabham home through the few remaining laps left. Here is Lauda at Stirling's, and his pit signals are about to tell him the news that there is a new second man in the shape of Derek Warwick, and he's a long, long way behind. Past the pits goes Niki Lauda, and ahead of him there's a very slow Brabham indeed. There is Nelson Piquet, the indignity for Nelson Piquet as he is lapped by Niki Lauda, and the order will now be Warwick second and Senna third. Elio De Angelis, the slowing Lotus of De Angelis, will move up into fourth place. But Niki Lauda has more back markers ahead of him. It's the arrows of Marc Surer. And this is poor Nelson Piquet crawling round now. Whatever the problem is, the engine's still running. No sign of any more of that smoke which heralded his slowing. There the positions after 67 laps, so 4 laps in total still to run. And De Angelis on the aggregate order still given third place, although Senna is only 2.5 seconds behind. Senna is going much quicker. Piquet is already down to fifth place on aggregate with Tombe sixth, and it won't be long before Senna establishes himself in third place on aggregate, I would think. Marc Surer is lapped now by Niki Lauda, who has Piercarlo Ghinzani ahead of him. Ghinzani has put in another good race here. Ghinzani is lapped in the Azella, and there is Elio De Angelis going slower and slower. In fact, he's just been passed now by René Arnoux. So yet again, we've got at the very end of a Grand Prix cars struggling home to finish, not least Nelson Piquet, who has been lapped by the leader Niki Lauda. And Lauda now reeling the laps off confidently down Pilgrim's drop, Dingle Dell, on to the left-hander at Stirling's, out of Stirling's, under the Longines Bridge. It's John Player this side, Clearways, Clark Curve, and now Lauda starts his final lap. And no doubt Alain Prost still watching from the pits. Alain Prost, who really looked as though he had this race in his pocket. But it's going to be another McLaren victory, and while one of the McLarens has failed, the other one was there to take over. Niki Lauda out of Druids for the last time. Third gear, Graham Hill Bend, up into fourth, along the curving Cooper Straight, down into third once more for Surtees, up the slight incline that will take him over the brow and down the Pilgrim's Drop section. There is Derek Warwick now in Druids for his last time. Derek Warwick, who's going to score his second place of the year. Meanwhile, already Niki Lauda is himself in Dingle Dell, up out of Dingle Dell to Dingle Dell corner. He's got Elio De Angelis and the Lotus ahead of him. De Angelis leads Lauda through the left-hander of Stirling's Bend. A burst of acceleration takes Niki Lauda past the Lotus. Now Lauda comes into sight of the start-finish crowds. Clark Curve up to the checkered flag. A war dance of delight from one of the McLaren mechanics who almost gets run over in the road. And there's Patrick Tambay. Tambay, who should be sixth. His car coming to a smoking halt. Bring the fire extinguisher, he says. It's on fire. Patrick Tambay himself puts the fire out. Derek Warwick squeezes past Hugh Brottengatter to take second place. So Niki Lauda, in his 151st Grand Prix, scores his 22nd victory. And for lovers of statistics, Niki Lauda has now scored more championship points in Grand Prix racing than any other driver in history. He has just overtaken Jackie Stewart's total, but I think much more important for Niki Lauda will be the 9 points that he scored today towards the 1984 World Championship. Warwick a splendid second, Ayrton Senna a superb and well-deserved third for Tolman, De Angelis struggling home fourth with the Lotus, ahead of Alboreto and Arnoux in the two Ferraris. Well, what an extraordinary British Grand Prix this has been. After 12 laps, out came the red flag, so only the first 11 laps counted. Jonathan Palmer's accident had stopped the race, and then this huge crowd saw a further start and a further 60 laps, so 71 laps in total of the British Grand Prix. There's a delighted Derek Warwick with his wife Rhonda and his little daughter on his arm, and he can feel very pleased with his second place because it ends a long drought of championship points for Derek Warwick. Prince Michael of Kent congratulates Niki Lauda, Jean-Marie Balesque congratulates Ayrton Senna, Derek Warwick in the picture as well. 3 victors, first, second and third, for Lauda, for Warwick and for Senna, and a splendid and exciting British Grand Prix.
Niki Lauda, his third win at Brands Hatch and third victory this year. You must be very pleased with that drive, Vicky.
The car was going very well. I had no problem, so therefore I could win the race.
What about when you saw your teammate go out? Did you worry about the same mechanical problem with your car?
No, not really, because some things can go wrong here or the other car. I certainly was not happy when he stopped, but I mean, if he stops, I'm happy that I could win.
Niki, personally, how do you feel about being the driver that has scored more Grand Prix points than anyone else in history, passing Jackie Stewart with these 9 points? It must be very rewarding to you.
It's more rewarding than 9 points to you, but I'm certainly happy to have the most points.
And the championship is very close now.
That's right, that's important.
A great team rivalry.
That's right.
Congratulations, Niki. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, as John Bisignano said, the World Drivers' Championship indeed is very much closer, because just 1.5 points now separate Alain Prost and Niki Lauda. Elio De Angelis, scoring yet another set of points in this so reliable season for him, is third with 26.5, 3 points behind him, René Arnoux. Keke Rosberg didn't score today, Derek Warwick did, so there's only 1 point between them. And McLaren have more points in their tremendous total in the World Constructors' Championship, 67.5 now to 34.5 for Ferrari, with Lotus a couple of points behind. Just 2 weeks away, we've got the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, another high-speed circuit. Join us then.